Hey there, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I have another interview for you. I have the wonderful, fabulous Amy here with me, and we are going to talk about all things mindset. Basically, what she's going to do is share a little bit more about herself, how she has shifted her mindset over the years, and how that can help you guys. And we might even talk about a little bit, like what's going on in the world. Times are changing, and it's always good to have a positive mindset, but also different perspectives on how we can just really take care of ourselves. So Amy, if you would do everyone the pleasure of introducing yourself, I would just love that.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here, and hello to the listeners. I'm happy to be here with you all today. And yeah, we are living in very interesting times right now. And I guess instead of focusing on what's actually happening right now, I would love to start by sharing a little bit about some of the tools that I've been using to help myself stay grounded, and so that you can really see some ways that you can start to implement some of these mindset tools into your day. And then I'd love to share my story as well of how I actually got here. So
Absolutely.
Does that sound like a good place to start?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think sharing, yes. Yep. Take the floor. Let's do this.
Okay, amazing. So, right now the energy in the collective, which essentially just means like the majority of people are experiencing different waves of emotion, which is totally normal because our minds aren't used to this. They're not used to uncertainty. And in fact, we actually try at all costs to avoid uncertainty as humans. We want to be able to control everything, to plan everything, because that keeps us safe or makes us feel safe. So in a time like this, where there's uncertainty about jobs, about the economy, about finances, about when you're going to be able to take your kids back to school, about changes that might be happening day to day with the rules that are going on and what you can and can't do, there's a lot that's in play right now that's hyping up our fight or flight response. And during these times, if we don't take the time to actually support your mindset even more than you normally do, so maybe the practices that you were doing before, if you did have any mindset practices, those might not be what you need right now, or maybe you need more of them right now. And if you didn't have any mindset practices before, now is a really great opportunity to start to practice some mindset tools. So I'll share what some of those tools are, but I really want to meet everyone where you're at today. And I just want to know that, like, if you've been feeling stressed, if you've been feeling anxious, that is okay. And to just really be compassionate and gentle with yourself during this time. If you've had like difficulty transitioning to this new way of life that we're experiencing right now. So I wanted to start there. And my recommendation and what I teach my clients and what is part of my philosophy is that if we want to set our mindsets up for success, the most important part of the day to do that is to start in the morning. And if you have kids, if you are, working, you might feel like, oh my God, the morning is the craziest time of all for me. That's okay. We can start with some small mindset practices that really only take a minute, and then incorporate some mindset practices throughout the day that can help you to stay grounded. So one example of a mindset practice is starting your day with a gratitude practice, which might sound very simple, to write down 3 things that you're grateful for. But when you understand why or the importance of doing that, you're more likely to actually do it. So when you direct your mind towards gratitude, it takes your mind away from fear. And starting your day with gratitude is going to support you in actually looking for the positive things throughout the day instead of focusing on fear throughout the day. So that's one practice that you can start and you can try. One of the practices that has been a staple in my life for the last 3 years, and I'll share a little bit more about how I got to my meditation practice, but is some sort of meditation practice. It can be a guided meditation. It can be a silent meditation. You can listen to music. And honestly, if you're not meditating right now, starting with just 5 minutes a day will still be effective. And you don't need to do 20 minutes to get the results. Right now, if you're not doing anything, starting with 5 is a great place to start. So those are some of the two most basic practices and rituals that I would invite people to start to work on in the morning to set yourself up for a clear mind for the day and to get you started on the right track. And I know a lot of people are waking up right now with anxiety, maybe even while you're sleeping, you're noticing like fear or restlessness and just like really experiencing what's going on in your nervous system in response to all of this. So those are some great ways to like get grounded in the morning. Two things that I've implemented myself, which are new practices, is I've been doing a thing called self-hypnosis, which essentially is just a recording of something that I want to manifest. So how I want to feel. So I recorded myself sharing about all of the ways that I want to feel. And I listen to that every day. So what it's doing is actually programming my subconscious mind to feel as if that's how I'm already feeling right now, instead of focusing on what's actually happening in front of me. So that's a little bit more of an advanced tool that I help my clients to create, but it is a really effective tool that has been supporting me in getting into that vibrational frequency of how I actually want to feel. And then the second tool that I've been using is called breath work. And breath work is an ancient practice of using your breath to calm your nervous system, to clear out any stuck emotions in the body, and to create clarity in your mind and give you energy and connection to your highest self. So those are some of my practices, and your practices might look different, which is great. I want you to customize them for yourself. But what I'm going to invite you into today is that not only do you listen about these tools, but that you actually implement them and just pick one thing that you can start with in the morning. So that would be where I would start for addressing and approaching where people's minds might be right now at this time.
I love that. And I love how you just kind of started with, we're going to meet you where you're at, because everybody can be in very, very different places now. We all handle stress, anxiety, overwhelm differently. So starting with a basic 5 minutes a day can really go a long way. So I love that. So how did you get into meditation and mindfulness and mindset practices to begin with?
Yeah. So I wasn't always this way, believe it or not. I feel like very grounded right now, even with everything else that's going on around me, which is definitely not the case. I never used to be okay with uncertainty, and it used to really create panic attacks and anxiety and really stirred me up in not the best ways. And I, just like most people, we usually as humans don't make changes until something goes wrong, until we feel desperate to make a change, or until the gap between where we are and where we want to be is so painful that we actually feel like we can't not make a change. So that's just how we're wired. And it's really important to know that. And also to know that you don't have to wait to get to that point until you make a change. But for me, that was the case where I was 25 years old and I got married and really went down the path of what I was taught by my parents and society is what I'm supposed to do in order to feel successful and happy. So essentially, I got married, we bought a house, we got a dog, and pretty much did everything other than having 2.5 kids. And I have nothing against having kids. I actually do still want kids. But for me at that time in my life, I didn't really actually know who I was and what I wanted, and was pretty much essentially living my life to please others, and not necessarily just to please others, but just to be accepted and approved of. And I didn't even know that I was doing that. So I was going through the motions. I had my own business, but I still wasn't feeling fulfilled. And from the outside, my life looked really picture perfect. Like no one would have been able to tell. But on the inside, the feeling that I was experiencing wasn't matching what my life looked like on the outside. And I like to share that because it's very easy with social media and with, comparison and everything that people experience, that like life doesn't look the same as pictures. People are all people and we all have things going on. So for me, what that looked like was being in a marriage where essentially there was no fighting, there was nothing wrong, but something felt off. And that's really challenging because to make a change in a relationship where nothing is quote unquote wrong seems crazy, right? But for me inside, what that felt like was very empty and feeling like I was off my path, feeling like I didn't really know myself, feeling disconnected from my life. It showed up in a lot of different ways for me in my health. I was struggling with emotional eating at the time, and my depression had gotten to really the worst it had ever been, and just felt really helpless and was like trying everything that I could. And essentially, after I had tried everything, reading books, going to therapists, I got to a point where one night I was sitting in the bathtub and I was just looking up and I was just like, there has to be another way. Like, I'm not meant to suffer like this. And I know that there has to be a bigger plan. And that was the first time where I really connected with faith, and really thinking like, wow, there has to be more than this. And I asked for help. For the first time, I surrendered and asked for help and said, please show me a sign. And from that moment, I got really more connected to my faith. And I was waking up at like 4 a.m. with anxiety and panic attacks, and just feeling like something was off. And I felt like I had no choice but to meditate, like waking up at 4 a.m. when everyone else is sleeping, and like going crazy in my head. I was like, all right, the only thing that I know that I can do right now is to go sit and meditate. And so that's where my meditation practice started from. And from there, I started to really connect to my truth and my intuition once I could quiet the negative voices in my mind and like really look at what was ego and what was my truth. I started to be able to connect to what actually I wanted in my life, and looked at where was my life completely off path because I hadn't been listening to my intuition up until that point.
I love that. I think it's very interesting that our breakthroughs always happen to be in the bathroom, whether it's in a tub or on the toilet or you're crying on the floor. That seems to be when like the realness comes out. I mean, they even say that in giving birth, like the bathroom is like a sacred, safe space for you just to kind of like relax and let go of emotions or toxins or whatever it is that's kind of holding you back. So I really enjoyed that. And then the other part that you talked about was finding your faith. And I don't know if you would like to share with listeners kind of like what that faith looks like for you, because I know very much it can be different to different people. Whether you are consider yourself to be more spiritual or more religious, but like, what did finding that faith look like? Like, what did it feel like? Kind of walk us through that journey, because I think a lot of times, like for me, when people were talking to me before I kind of became on the other side of things, they're like, oh, you just like, you feel it, you know it. And I'm like, tell me, like, I want specifics. Like, how did you know that you found this? And how do you know what your intuition is? How do you know what's telling you? So if you could put into words what that experience looks or feels like, what would you say?
Yeah, this is a really beautiful question. And I think it is really important because I do believe that everyone has access to this, and that different people find it at different points in their life. So there's people who go through their entire life and, maybe at the age of 60 or 70 have what we call a spiritual awakening. And I grew up with essentially a religious background. I grew up in a Jewish home and went to a Jewish private school, but that was more religious, and I was never really connected spiritually. So a lot of times people will find their faith in the depths of despair when they feel like they've lost all hope, and then discover their faith. But there's also times where people discover their faith maybe when they're bringing life into the world, or when they discover they're pregnant, or when someone passes and it changes them in some way. So just really honoring everyone's unique process of when that happens. And for me, what faith feels like is no longer trying to go through life alone, and knowing that you're always being guided, and that you are that you're being supported by something greater, that you're connected to something greater. And when we look at the spiritual path, it looks like something like this, is that we come into the world as new beings, and all we know is love. We don't know judgment. We don't know separation. We don't know comparison. And that only happens after, you know, the age of 7, essentially, when we start having conscious reasoning in our minds. So as children, we're very innocent beings. And along the way, whether it's through parents, whether it's through school, whether it's through media, something shows us that we're different and that we're separate. And we start to believe that. And when you start to cultivate faith, or when you start to turn back around, is when it is the turning point of coming back home to love. And that's really the path that we're all on in different trajectories at different rates, is finding our way back home to that love inside of us, where there is no judgment, where there is no comparison, and where we really experience that feeling of oneness and peace. And unless you're spiritually enlightened, which there's very few people in the entire world who are, you're not going to experience that all the time. So even giving grace that, like, there are going to be times where you forget what your faith is, and you are going to come back to the humanness of it all very often. And that's why daily practices of connecting to your faith, such as meditation or journaling, breath work, different modalities, help you to stay connected to that feeling. For me, what it feels like is lightness. It feels really pure. It feels super energizing. So it's as if like a creative energy comes through me, and it feels inspiring. And the word alignment, which, you know, is a challenging word to understand until you actually feel it in your body, but it feels like alignment. It feels like everything's happening for you. It's happening as it's supposed to. And it feels like you're on the right path.
I love that. And I always have to put, I like to break things down into like a physical form so that I could kind of put like a picture with what alignment feels like. And so for listeners, or even just for myself, when I heard the word alignment, I'm like, what in the hell does that mean? Like, I don't even, like, what is it? But you're right. It is like this feeling of like flow, like you're in like the zone. Things feel good. They feel easy. But if you think about it, the way that I want like people to visualize is everybody has a spine, right? You have a spine, you have vertebrae all the way down your spine. Now, if you have several or just even one vertebrae out of whack, you don't move easily. You have pain, you're hunched over, you have something that is causing you either a disability or a dis-ease or discomfort in your body, right? But when things are moving in alignment, you can just kind of like free flow through life without pain, without like being hindered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that visuals are so important, and that I feel like that was really, really clear visual. And I actually believe that, you know, the woo-woo spiritual stuff doesn't make sense for a lot of people because people can't relate to it in their logical mind, which is why I find that incorporating neuroscience, like understanding how your brain works, and then also another science called quantum physics of scientifically, like, how does law of attraction work, or how does manifestation work, and really understanding like the how, because we do need to understand that in order for our mind to even like grasp what that means. But things like faith, or there's another word that comes up a lot. I mean, I guess things like faith and alignment are, without context of what that feels like or looks like, it's challenging to actually implement it or really get it in what a way that I call like embody it. So instead of just logically understanding it, but like actually feeling it and knowing it, and that allows you to live it and experience the benefits of it.
I love that. And like the other word that comes to mind when you like speak of faith, it's, to me, the two things that come up is like surrendering to the experience that is at hand, but then also trusting in the process. And so you have to have a certain amount of trust, a certain amount of faith that things will work out if you just keep that forward momentum.
Yeah, exactly. And we're taught not to trust. You know, we are shown in the media, when you look at the news, you know, all of the things that could go wrong. And when we're younger, we're taught, don't do this and don't do that, because parents are afraid you're going to get hurt. And it's not their fault. It's just how we raise children, is how that's how we're taught. We want to take care of children, but that we're taught to be afraid. We're taught to be scared. We're taught to look for the danger so that we can survive, which is a survival mechanism. And yeah, that piece of trust can be learned and can be felt over time.
But even going on the fear topic, like I I love the topic of fear because people so often try to avoid fear, but really it is our body's defense mechanism to keep us safe. But just recognizing what fear is on like a basic level, like it's just trying to keep you safe, right? But if we program everything we do based on fear, we're just living fearful lives versus saying like, okay, what is this fear? Let's break it down. Is this scenario really going to happen? Or is my fear just trying to keep me safe? And so I almost think of fear as like a symptom to something that I'm going to be doing. So if this seems scary, I'm like, oh, I'm experiencing fear. Fear is a symptom to this action that I'm going to take. Is this action actually going to kill me? Or is this just trying to, keep me stuck to where I'm at? And it's like, okay, once you assess that, then you can decide whether or not to move forward. But I feel like even like our parenting, we've only learned a very fear-based way of parenting, of teaching, of showing up in the world. But as you probably know, fear is actually like that fear and anxiety, like those are low vibrating energies. And when you open yourself up to that susceptibility, I think is the word I'm looking for, like you can have other things come up, like your immune system can be lowered. You feel like blah, and there's like brain fog and there's fatigue because your body is like working in hyperdrive, like overload, trying to overcome this fear. Like it really takes a toll on your nervous system.
100%. Yeah. Fear is exhausting. And also, what I teach is to, instead of resist the fear, is to actually lean into it and get curious about it. Because if there's fear, it usually means that you're stepping out of your comfort zone, and your comfort zone isn't actually comfortable. I heard this from one of my coaches a long time ago, but it's just familiar and it's just safe. So if you want to get different results, if you want to see changes in your life, if you want to become that version of yourself that deep down you know that you can be, then it's looking at like, where is that fear stopping me? And you have to step out of that comfort zone in order to become a new version of yourself. So fear, if we can actually look at it and dance with the fear and be interested in the fear and actually be excited and know, oh, wow, it's okay for me to feel afraid. And that's actually because I'm growing, because I'm leaning into something new, because I'm taking courageous action to become this new version of myself.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself.
That's okay. That happens. But I think everyone actually, well, no, maybe not everyone listening, but I think most people are familiar with Zoom at this point in the world because we're now basically living on Zoom. So that happens often.
I know. I even said this too, because I've been using Zoom. I want to say this is third year that I've been a part of Zoom, and I just absolutely love, not to like sidetrack, but I love it. And then I'm like kicking myself in the ass because I should have bought stock in Zoom like 2 years ago. Yeah. But yes, no, I love how you said like dance with the fear. Another analogy that like really stuck with me with fear is, and I don't even remember who to give credit. This is not mine. Somebody else came up with this, but it really stuck with me because I spend so much time. Well, side note, I used to spend so much time in the car. And so inviting fear into the passenger seat and saying like, okay, you can come along for the ride, but you're not going to stop me from getting my destination. Like we're here, we're in it. You're coming with me. I see that, but then I'm going to drop you off before I get to my destination kind of thing. So just like inviting it in, letting it ride along, knowing that like it's there, but like ultimately you have control of where you're going. You are in the driver's seat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the way that I teach my clients and my philosophy of how to overcome fear, part of it is getting familiar with when you have a fear-based or limiting thought that's blocking you. But the other part is actually building up your confidence so that your confidence and your courage is greater than your fear. And in order to do that, that's the deep inner work we're talking about. So you have to first look at, okay, do I love myself enough to change my life in a way that I know that I want to? Do I feel worthy and deserving of being the woman that I want to be? And really looking at self-trust too. Do I trust myself enough to get on the other side of this fear? And no matter what happens, do I trust myself that I can figure it out? And that to me is the work. It's looking at the fear, yes, and not allowing the fear to control you. And the way that we do that is really start to break down, like, what are the actual fundamental fears that are coming up? Are you being held back by people pleasing, perfectionism, comparison, self-judgment, imposter syndrome? Like, what is it? And it's probably a combination of both. And what limiting beliefs, such as I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm unlovable, like all of these beliefs actually, believe it or not, come from the ages of 0 to 7. And we get programmed in our mind a certain belief system that then carries out through the rest of our life. And we see things through that filter. So it's really identifying what are the fears. So looking at them, acknowledging them, knowing what they are. And then at the same time is building up the confidence, which confidence is like knowing who you are, knowing what you desire, and loving yourself enough to go after it. And that's why most of my work is all about intuition and confidence, because you need both of those things in order to actually get the results and become a new version of yourself.
I think it's really important to touch on the self-worth and the imposter syndrome and the self-love side of things, because really those underlying beliefs, limiting beliefs, hold a lot of people back. And a lot of times they don't even know that they have that limiting belief. It's just within like their language. And so bringing awareness to maybe the lack of self-worth or the lack of confidence or the lack of self-love is the first step. And then teaching, how to overcome those things. Because really, if you have a lack of self-worth, that shows up in a lot of areas of your life. Like you don't have boundaries. You might not take good care of yourself, either mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, because you don't feel worthy of it. Or you may struggle to ask for help because you feel like you're wasting people's time. Like, what is the most common, I don't want to say like excuses, because a lot of times people don't even know that it's like a self-worth thing. Like, what are the things that you hear the most when it comes to, low self-worth or low self-love, things like that? Like, what can people look for so that they're like, oh my God, that's me?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially it comes down to what is the voice inside of your head saying throughout the day. So it really is actually starting to look at, like, what are the repetitive thoughts that are happening for me? And the root, when we look at worthiness, like, I actually didn't understand what that word meant, because it was never really taught in to me in a way that I understood it. And it was just this like personal development word until I really got it. But worthiness is the idea and understanding that you're good enough, and
yes,
that you're good enough exactly as you are in this moment, and that you don't need to do anything or be anyone or have more in order to be enough, in order to be loved, in order to be worthy of being happy and well and having financial abundance. And, I heard this on another podcast a few weeks ago, and it was one of the most powerful things I've heard. And whether people believe in God or the universe, I think that it doesn't matter. I think that this is just such a powerful understanding of worthiness. And it really is about, if you were to sit in a chair in the middle of a room for your entire life, the universe or God would still love you. And if you can believe that, that means that, like, no matter what you do is enough. And knowing that you don't need to, you just get to be yourself is enough. And that's why every result in your life is based on your worthiness. If you let people treat you a certain way and they speak to you in a certain way, if you let people walk all over you, if you feel like a doormat and people walk all over you, if you don't speak up at work and ask for what you need, if you are in relationships or in social circles where there's toxic energy or people are talking badly about each other, if you don't take care of your body and you put other people before yourself all the time, if you overspend and you don't believe that you can make more money and that you are capable of getting out of debt, those are just a few places of where worthiness shows up. And another thing that you shared earlier was self-care. If you are not taking care of yourself, it's not because you don't have time. It's because you don't believe deep down inside that you are worthy of taking care of yourself. And these are really challenging conversations to have. These are not easy realizations or
Absolutely.
understandings. So I just want to be really gentle with, if people are hearing this and being like, wow, that's me. Like, I really want to start by that. There's nothing wrong with you. And that when you start to feel like, oh, wow, now there's something wrong with me, that brings on shame, which actually stops you from making changes and keeps you stuck. So just being really gentle of just being curious and seeing, oh, wow, I didn't know that about myself. Okay, great. Like, now I can start to get curious about what would that look like for me to become and feel really worthy.
Yeah, I think that shame is another thing that really holds people back, because they attach a circumstance or an outcome or a judgment to whatever action they are choosing to take, or choosing not to take, or lack of actions. And just really understanding that, like, shame is a feeling. Sit with it, move through it, and just know that, yeah, it's a curiosity standpoint. Like, oh, great, that's how I'm feeling right now. Cool, I'm human. We all experience shame. I mean, even when I was in the very beginning stages of personal development, I felt shame for not knowing more things. Like, somebody would bring something to my attention and I'd be like, oh, wow, I'm a real dumbass because I didn't know what they were talking about. And then you feel like shame around it. And then you kind of like sit with that. And then you're like, no, it's okay. Now I know better, so I'm going to do better. And so it's just, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Don't just sit there and be stuck in that shameful energy. Sit with it long enough to feel it and move through it, but then do something about it.
Amazing. Yeah. Shame is the belief and a feeling that there's something wrong with you. And when you feel like there's something wrong with you, you're not going to be able to take action from that place. And I would imagine that some of your listeners are familiar with Brene Brown, who is
absolutely.
she's a really well-known researcher on the topic of shame. And she says that shame cannot live. Shame only lives in secrecy. So what I often do, and what I believe is so powerful, and why I believe sisterhood and women coming together to share, is that when they're in that space, women can start to see, oh, wow, I'm not alone. It's not just me. Other people also experience this. Oh, wait, it's not that embarrassing. But everyone walks around with masks and pretends that they're fine. Everyone walks around with masks, pretends that their life is perfect. And when that happens, that's why people feel like they're alone and feel like there's something wrong with them. So a lot of the work that I do is in group settings with women, is to bring women together and have really meaningful, deep conversations, which is what most people actually want. We want deep connection. We want to be vulnerable, but again, we're afraid. And in a space that's set up for non-judgment, in a space that's set up for growth, and where you know that the other people who are in that space are not there to judge you, but they're also there to grow, that opens up a whole space for healing, of being able to say, oh, wow, like, I'm not actually alone, and I have other people who I can rely on, or other people who understand me. And that in that moment is very likely like the most freeing experience that any woman can have, of knowing that it's safe to be herself, and knowing that it's safe to share her truth, and that she's not going to be judged or criticized by doing that. So I'm feeling in that.
Absolutely. And I think it's the hard part for women, I think, is finding that group, because I come from a very corporate background, and women were very catty and very negative, and every single person I encountered talked bad about the other. So it's like, it's trying to find those people that are not going to be non-judgmental, because I'm sure we've all been in that boat where we're with people and they're like, oh, you can tell me, you can share anything. And then 2 seconds later, they turn around and use it as ammo against us. And it's like they all point the finger, and so really finding that space to those people, that space to be open and be yourself, But I think you also have to just be confident and let go of everybody else's expectations that you think that they're placing on you, and just really say like, no, I'm going to own my own truth regardless of what you say or think about me. And in a sense, it's like this radical honesty. I've heard this phrase before. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but basically anything that you're thinking, acting, or feeling on the inside, voicing that on the outside. And that is so much harder than we think it is. And it's a practice. It's not something that you just show up and you're like, oh, I'm going to spill all of my guts because somebody says like, I'm safe here. You have to actually feel safe. You have to embody that safety and that sacredness of it. And there's a certain energy in the room and with the people. And this is almost more of a feeling, but you'll know when you're with the right people. And that's when that like gut feeling comes in, or that intuition that says like, nope, this is a safe space. And that fear will try to tell you otherwise, but you know, in your gut, like it's now the time. And once you can start to share those things, it's like when that Me Too movement came, one person shares it, one person opens up, one person becomes vulnerable, and it gives the next person that same permission to say like, hey, me too. And then they share their story. And it's like this big inspiring ripple effect to where we can start sharing what we feel on the inside on the outside.
So true. And I really love that you brought up that it can be challenging to find that group. And I actually just worked with a group of women from Google and a bunch of other tech companies, and they are used to that landscape of women being catty and deceiving and not being able to trust women. And it is amazing. In 1 or 2 sessions already, the relaxation and the understanding of what it feels like to be safe can be accessed very quickly. And if someone's wondering, well, how do I find these people? Honestly, if you're doing the inner work and you're starting to focus on you, and instead of focusing on there's no one like me, what I would recommend is, as you become more of yourself, you're going to let go of people who are toxic in your life. You're going to create more space for people who are supportive. And so there's a quote by Jim Rohn, and he says, he's a motivational speaker, and he says, don't go as often and don't stay as long. And essentially it doesn't mean you have to cut people out of your life or you need to completely radically change everything all at one time, but it is starting to create space to surround yourself with more positive people. And also, even if you don't know where those people are going to come from, what I experienced, especially after my divorce, and like really being unsure of if anyone in my life was still going to love me or approve of me, like that was the radical stance that I was willing to take, and the safety that I had in myself that I had built up. But when you are starting to raise your own frequency, when you start to have more positive thoughts, when you start to take care of yourself, what you're actually doing is matching your vibrational frequency. If we're looking at quantum physics, is you're matching with other people who are on that level. And what's going to start to happen, and this is where like the miracles and the magic do come in, is a book is going to come across your path where it tells you that there's a group of women online in this forum that you can connect with, or someone that you haven't talked to for a really long time is going to invite you to an event, or you're going to see an ad on your computer or an email that like maybe you wouldn't have seen before, because now you're open to it, because your mind is looking for that. And so it doesn't actually have to be this challenging, like trying to fit in method of finding a group. It actually is more about continuing to focus on you and your alignment, which then actually attracts new opportunities to you. And I never used to have close girlfriends. I always had challenges with my relationship with women. And now I actually don't know what I would do without my girlfriends. They're like my support team. They're my sisters that I can rely on and that I trust, and that they're just, it's incredible. So just so that you know, and for everyone who's listening, is even if this hasn't been part of your life before, this is something that you definitely can have access to, and it doesn't have to take that long to create it.
No, everybody can have access to it. And I like to, I want to throw another analogy on things, but like I call this, hang on, my kid.
Mhm.
I call this like the red car analogy, right? Like if you want a red car and you're like, okay, I'm looking at red cars. I see all the red cars. I'm reading about red cars. I really want a red car, but I don't really know where to buy a red car. And the next thing you know, you start seeing red cars all over the road. And the next thing you know, there's an email that says like, hey, I have a red car for sale and it's the exact price that you want to pay, the exact make and model. And you're just like, oh, okay. But it's figuring out, not to the exact, but figuring out what you want. So if you're looking for a community, if you're looking for a safe space, set that intention. Maybe you gratitude journal about it. Like, I am so thankful that the universe or God is giving me, is looking for me, is searching for me, is going to provide me with a safe community that I can have as a support group, or whatever that looks like. And then just keep setting that intention. When you're focused on that, you will start to see it more and more and more. And then that's where that gut and that intuition, like you'll know when the right one comes up. We all know, we all have that gut feeling. Okay, I heard you. You all have that gut feeling, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to take a step on this opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to bring it back to the science, what you're talking about with the red car is that's actually a part of our brain called the reticular activation system, or reticular activating system, and RAS. And it actually is at the bottom of like your brain stem. And it's part of your brain that filters in information and filters out fear, or filters out harm and danger. So your mind is actually looking for those things. So yes, it is definitely on an energetic, spiritual perspective that these magical things start happening. And then also from a really like understanding the science behind how that works, is like that actually is a part of our brain that's built in to support us in staying safe. So it's a really cool mechanism that our brain has. And once you start to look for certain things, they start to show up.
I love that there's a science behind it all. Cause and that's one of the reasons that I love Brene Brown so much, is because she talks about the emotions and things like that. But then she also attaches like statistics and science and numbers and things, so that it's like you have the tangible evidence, but you also have like the testimonials and the experience too. And so it just makes it that much more impactful when you can kind of have both sides of it. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I love that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just found that, if people are told meditation's good for you, or affirmations are good for you, or gratitude's good for you, without the understanding of why or how, oftentimes it won't stick. It doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, that feels good and that sounds good, but most people won't actually do it. So for me, at least in my experience, I mean, I work with a lot of, corporate women as well, and we're very logical minded and very intelligent. And our mind wants to understand, like, why and how does this work? Not just like, oh, that sounds fluffy and nice and fun for some people, but not for me.
No, you need to know the who, the what, the where, the why, the how.
Yeah.
You need to know how the gears work on the inside. So I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we start to land this plane, what is it well, first I want to ask you a last couple of things is, how do you work with people? Like, how do you typically work with clients? Let's start there.
Okay. So I have worked in a variety of different ways with clients. I've been in the coaching industry and space for about 7 years now. So I'm not new on the block, I would say. And I work one-on-one and in group settings. And all of my coaching containers, all of the coaching experiences are 6-month experiences. And that's because I really walk people first through the phase of awareness. So I call that awakening, and awareness of the fears, the limiting beliefs, understanding what are the things that have actually been truly holding them back, which are usually blind spots that they haven't been able to see before. And then after awareness, then we're focusing on how to build up the confidence. So we're looking at self-trust, self-worth, self-love, really coming back into alignment with who you truly are without those limiting beliefs that you've learned over time. And then the third step is inspired action. So throughout this process is really helping people to get clear on, what do I want? Who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I want my life to look like without what everyone else thinks that they want for me? And then how do I create the mindset such that I have the confidence and the inner trust and the intuition to then be able to create that in my life. So I walk through a system and a process, and a lot of that involves what we talked about earlier, is releasing the shame and the self-judgment so that you can take action and move forward. And so that looks, similar in both my one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and it's called Discover Your Confidence, is the process that I created in order to really become the most confident version of yourself.
I love that. I just love the word confidence, like probably one of my favorite words. Okay. So before I kind of wrap this up, what do you want to leave listeners with? Like, what's their takeaway from this?
What I want to leave them with is really thinking back over the last 50 minutes of us having this conversation, and think about what lit you up the most. Like, what was the most exciting for you? What was the most inspiring for you? What was something that you were like, yeah, I really want to try that? And instead of this just being another podcast that you listen to and then move on to the next thing in your day, I would love for you to write down one action step that you can take in order to implement that into your life. And that's going to be the difference between intellectually knowing something and actually embodying it, and then being able to experience the benefits from it as well. So really starting with what was the most exciting, and then picking like one action step that you can take to implement that.
Perfect. And how can people get a hold of you? How can they learn more? Because I know that I need to learn more. I'm thinking in my head, like, you're going to be my friend. I'm just going to throw that out there. So
I love it. Well, yeah,
this isn't the last you've seen of me.
Amazing. Well, I'd love to have you on my podcast as well. I have
Absolutely.
a podcast called the Feminine Frequency Podcast, and I have 2 ways that you can connect with me outside of the podcast. So the first way is most people are on Instagram. So if you'd like to connect with me there, it's at Amy Natalie Co. And then I also have an online group on Facebook called The Confidence Collective. And I spend quite a bit of time in there doing free trainings, sharing different conversations that I'm having with the women in there around what's holding them back from confidence, and giving them real tools to be able to shift that. So those are the best ways right now to connect with me. And all of that is also listed on my website, which is amynatalieco.com.
I love that. Thank you. I will also put the show notes and all of your links in the show notes for anybody listening to this. So do me a favor, scroll down, click those links, go follow her on social media, join the Confidence Collective, go check out her podcast. We'll have to set something up to where we can chat over on there too. But I do want to say just thank you so much. I really loved this podcast, and my kids were actually pretty good during the whole thing. So there was only a couple of hiccups there, but it is what it is. It's life, right?
They did really great. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. I really appreciated this. And anybody, if you're listening to this, if you enjoyed this podcast, I would love it if you could leave an honest review either on iTunes, or you can do me a favor, screenshot this, share on social media, tag us both. Yeah, Amy, thanks again. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who is listening. It was beautiful to be here with you today. Thank you.